Lord, who said to me, return to your country and your relatives, and I'll prosper you, which we just read. I am unworthy of all the loving kindness and all the faithfulness which you have shown to your servant, for with my staff only I crossed this Jordan, and now I have become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. For you said, I will surely prosper you and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which is too great to be numbered. And we're not going to be able to do that if Esau shows up and massacres us all. So when you look at the life of Jacob and you see a lot of problems in his life, obviously all the duplicity, all the lies, all the deception, yet he is anxious for the Lord to be his God. He's anxious to give to the Lord. He seeks the Lord in his hour of desperation. And he trusts the Lord to be the source of his life and the source of his protection. And he was. He was. The time came for Jacob to pass away, and he passes on the birthright. He passes the birthright on to Joseph. Let's look at chapter 48 of Genesis. Now you know we're getting to the end. Came about after these things, Joseph was told, behold, your father's sick. So he took his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. Joseph had two sons. I don't want to get too complicated here, folks. We talk about the 12 tribes of Israel, don't we? When they came into the land, 12 tribes were allotted land. There actually were 13 tribes of Israel, because one of the tribes was Joseph, but his portion was split into two parts, Ephraim and Manasseh. And the Levites, the tribe of Levi, had no land. They were the priestly tribe. So Joseph appears with his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz, back at Bethel in the land of Canaan, blessed me. He said, behold, I'll make you fruitful and numerous, and make you a company of people, give you this land to your descendants for you for an everlasting possession. Had he seen it? No. Had he seen a great nation? No. Had he seen people like the sand of the sea? No. It was a promise. He died believing that promise was true. Now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are mine. But your offspring that have been born after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the names of their brothers in their inheritance. And he goes on, and the key thing is the promise that is pronounced there at the very beginning. It is passed on through him to the next generation, namely Ephraim and Manasseh. I'm not going to read all the rest of this, but go down to verse 12. Joseph took them from his knees and bowed with his face to the ground. He took both of them, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's left, Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel or Jacob's right, and brought them close to him, stretched out his right hand, laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands. Although Manasseh was the firstborn, he blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, and there's another indication of Jacob's true faith, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and may my name live on in them, and the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him, and he grasped his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. Joseph said to his father, not so, my father, for this one is the firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also will become a people. He also will be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, by you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. So Ephraim becomes another name for Israel, as Israel becomes another name for Jacob. Israel says to Joseph, I'm about to die, but God will be with you and bring you to the land of your fathers. There's Jacob's faith. He'd heard from God. He couldn't change his mind. He couldn't move his hands. He died in faith, never having seen the results. That leaves us only Joseph. And what does it say in verse 22 of Hebrews chapter 11? Simply stated about Joseph, it tells us that he also, while dying, when he was dying, made mention of the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave orders concerning his bones. He's dying. Now, he has not received the promise. The promise now is very old. It's very old. It's 200 years since it was given to Abraham. Nobody has yet seen it. They've all died without seeing it fulfilled. Look at Genesis 50, the last chapter in Genesis. Joseph, verse 22, is in Egypt. He and his father's household lived 110 years. Joseph saw the third generation of Ephraim's sons. Joseph said to his brothers in chapter 50, verse 24, I'm about to die, but God will surely take care of you and bring you up from this land. He promised you that land. We're still in Egypt. They're all nomads. They're all wanderers. They've never been in the land. They've never possessed the land. They've never had the kingdom. They've never been a blessing. They've never experienced deliverance and salvation as a people. They aren't yet a people. I'm about to die, but God will do what He promised. He promised an oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you should take my bones from here. So Joseph died at the age of 110 and was embalmed and placed in a coffin in Egypt. Wow. Died a stranger, never having received the promise. Now, what is the writer of Hebrews telling us? You get it now, don't you? These are people of faith. I mean, their whole lives were built around this promise that had been given to Abraham and passed on to these three other patriarchs. And everything in their life focused on the confidence that they had that God would do what He said He would do because God could be trusted. They never saw it. I mean, this is faith at its highest level, is it not? These aren't people who live at a low level. Sinful, absolutely. Duplicitous, deceitful, absolutely. Weak, vacillating, sometimes immoral, absolutely. Living in a primitive time without the full revelation or the full riches of the Spirit that we know today. They struggled perhaps in ways that we don't, and maybe that's why there was a little more tolerance of those things, as Scripture indicates in the past. But what may be true about that part of their lives doesn't cancel out what's true about the commitment they made to trust God. They could not be deterred from giving the blessing to whom the blessing belonged. Abraham would not give it to Ishmael, it went to Isaac. Isaac would not give it to Esau, it went to Jacob. Jacob would not give it to Manasseh, it went to Ephraim. They all died never having seen it. They died as strangers, wanderers, nomads. A couple of them in...
I need you in this moment. I need you in this moment. I need you in this moment. Now, Jesus, you got a dead situation, but you got a now Jesus. You've got a sick heart, but you've got a now Jesus. You've got a weary soul, but you've got a now Jesus. Say it out loud. I got a now Jesus. I want everybody in the chat to put it in. I got a now Jesus, a now Jesus, a now Jesus. I got a third day Jesus, a fourth day Jesus, a generational Jesus, a Jesus who was the Word in the beginning and He won't fail me now. I got a now Jesus. And when He says, take me to the place where you laid the body, He already knows where the grave is. He's just been waiting on you to take Him there. He knows. He knows. You don't. But I'm going forward, not knowing. He said, if you believe, you'll see God's glory. And then He said, Lazarus, come out, and they all sang rattle. In my version. Y'all don't have that version? And you know what, church? I was reading. Oh, God. I was reading the last chapter of Deuteronomy before I came over here to do our anniversary service. 17 years. And I didn't even think about it, but the guy I had to come preach was 17 years older than me. And my oldest son, who I'm dedicating this series, is 17. When I want to understand why y'all as a church are acting wild, I just look at him and remember that's the stage we're at. And I'm going to try not to kill you. Love him so much, man, because he started me in this club. And if he started on any other day, I wouldn't have read Deuteronomy 34. And I read it and I closed it because I thought, that's sad. I want to have an anniversary. And I'm reading about Moses looking on the mountain and dying. And God, are you telling me I'm not going to see the things that you promised me because I don't have faith? I came to church. I was back there talking to my guest. And they came over and I felt bad because they were bugging him. They said, you sent us a bunch of different sermon titles. Which one are you going to do? And he said, I think I'm leaning toward the one that says, this is not your final chapter. And y'all, look what the next book of my Bible was. Hold on. It's coming into focus just like your purpose is right now. "17 and 17, and it's Deuteronomy 34. And I wrote a song that says there's so much more to the story with Chandler and Ben and Naomi. And we sang it and called it More Than Able and did an Ephesians Bible study called Immeasurably More. And you think God is done with you because Moses is gone? Now Joshua. Now Jesus. Now Jesus. Now unto him who is able to do yet. I hope y'all like this song. There's so much more to the story. Because I'm going to be preaching Joshua. We're going to be singing this with me. You say it. You're not done with me. Close your eyes for a moment and receive it. You're not done with me. There's so much more to the story. I declare a chapter 1 in your life today. You're not done with me. God of new beginnings. You're not done with me. The God of new endings. You're not done with me. Says the God of second chances. There's so much more to this story. With God there's always a way. You're not done with and by faith we're gonna find him. We got a missing Moses, come on. But we have a living God. We have a living hope. We have a living word. So much more to this I call dreams forth. Now Jesus. I call freedom forth. Now Jesus. I call it purpose forth. Now Jesus. I call healing of your broken heart forth. It's over. Now Jesus. It's over. The past is over. And all things are made new. You're not done with me. Hey, there's so much more to this story. You're not done with me. You're not done with me. Well, if you enjoyed today's podcast, there are a couple things I'd love for you to do. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can also help us reach others by investing today at elevationchurch.org/give. And thanks again for joining us on the Elevation Podcast.
Well, thank you for joining in. I'm excited to have an opportunity. I just got through doing an interview on CNN. And I thought while I was set up, I would spend a little moment and visit with you and share something with you that I think is impactful and important, how to defeat worry. And you might not need this today. You might not need it right now. You might not need it for what you're going through. But sooner or later, all of us go through times in life that are hard to bear, that are difficult, that sometimes bring you to your knees, that sometimes keep you up at night, sometimes gives you indigestion, sometimes affects your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, and even affects your spiritual well-being. In fact, worry is such a powerful thing, it can actually ultimately affect your physical well-being. So what's going on in your head will affect what's going on in your body. And you need to understand that it's sometimes the worry is more lethal than what you're worrying about. I'm going to say that again. The worry is more lethal than what you're worrying about. You're worrying about something that often can be fixed, but while you're worrying about it, it's doing all kind of damage to you. And the difficult thing about being worried, especially when you're a spiritual person, is sometimes you don't even want anybody to know that you're worried about it. You feel obligated to maintain this facade that suggests that nothing bothers you, nothing gets to you. You turn it all over to the Lord in prayer, and all of that's wonderful and all of that's good. But if you live long enough, if you just live long enough, you will go through some things that will try your heart, that will bother you. If you have children, if you have a marriage, if you have a business, if you have a company, if you're pastoring a church, if you're leading a flock, you'll find yourself in situations of being overwhelmed. And often at the moments that you feel overwhelmed, there's little to nobody to turn to, and you find yourself feeling really, really frustrated. I just posted something on Instagram. It's not my last post, but the one right before that, where I talk about 5 things that you can do that will help you with worry. And if you get a chance, run over there and look at them as a video, and then beneath the video, I talk about these 5 points. But in that format, I couldn't elongate and talk about it to the depth that I would like to. And so I thought I would jump on here in case there are people that are worried. And I'm not just talking about the pandemic, though that is certainly a backdrop for worry. But life doesn't stop because of the pandemic. So that doesn't, bills still continue to come. Marriages are still in trouble. Domestic violence is going up. Stress and fatigue is impacted by coronavirus. We didn't need that. We already had enough things going on to keep us up at night, and then this comes along and gets in there too, and it creates sometimes stress and emotional disorders are silent killers. You don't even realize how bad it is. And then other times you do realize. I see one of you talking about having a loved one in ICU. That's the kind of thing where it's traumatic, not only for the patient, but for the family. It's traumatic for your lifestyle. It disrupts everything going on in your life. It's traumatic emotionally because you have a certain amount of fear. You don't want to lose them. You're trying to walk in faith, and then you're criticizing yourself when you're not walking in faith, and you start going over and over and over and over again in your mind. And I wanted to list some things here. I listed 5 things you can do to maintain productive thinking. And number 1 is don't waste time on whose fault it is in a crisis. Blame doesn't fix anything. I never will forget, years ago, I was in West Virginia, and I came down I was riding my car over top of a mountain, and when I came over the mountaintop down into the valley, there was a terrible, terrible wreck. And I pulled over to the side of the road. I was a very young man. I pulled over to the side of the road, ran over to the car. The guy's windshield was busted. His head was bleeding. He had various lacerations. He was barely conscious. And I said to him, "Do you want me to call the police?" And he said, "No, call an ambulance." And it was an amazing thing that I will never forget, but it was a life lesson for me. He wasn't worried about who was to blame, who was at fault, who was going to get a citation. He just wanted to get better. So many times we have a tendency to focus on who to blame not realizing that all the energy you're spending on blaming and trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong and proving that you were right and this shouldn't have happened to you and whatever it is that went on in your life, you're calling the police when you ought to call an ambulance. And so I tell you how ineffective blame is, even if you're blaming yourself. It doesn't matter who caused the wreck. It matters that I'm wrecked and my head is bleeding, and you have to prioritize when you're under attack what is most important and focus your energy on that. And blame is not important. Blame never fixed anything. So my first point, I'm going to say it again in case you're writing it down. Don't waste time on whose fault it is in a crisis. After the crisis is over, we might have a discussion about how to prevent this from happening again. We might get down to whose fault it was. And generally, a lot of times, fault is broad enough to be shared. A lot of times when you find out there's your side to the story, there's their side to the story, and then there's what really happened. So we don't have time to waste time on an analysis of fault when you're in a crisis. And I hope this helps somebody. Number two, if you find yourself spinning your wheels mentally, give your mind a break. Come back to it after some rest. Rest restores the mind to restoration. Okay? There's a reason restoration is called restoration. Sometimes you get to the point that if you're in a situation and you're going through a test and you find yourself spinning your wheels mentally, and I call it that because, again, in West Virginia, you would get stuck in the snow somewhere, and I don't care how much you put the pedal down, I don't care how bad you needed to go there, those wheels would turn and turn and turn, but that car was not moving because you were just spinning your wheels. And that's what worry is spinning your emotional wheels. You're going through the same thoughts over and over and over and over again, and you're just spinning your wheels. You're not getting any further. And I'm telling you something right now. You can spin your wheels for years. I've literally seen people who kept thinking about the same thing over and over again and thinking about it the same way and never gaining any ground and never stopped doing it and do that for years. All the while the enemy is stealing your future away, stealing the promises of God away in your life, causing you not to be as productive as you really could be, and you are literally spinning.
Here, he won't be offended. By the way, what you worship as unknown, I'm about to proclaim to you. You think you're right, but you're wrong. What's the first thing that he says to him? The true God is not worshipped by idols. I walked around in your city and I found idols. The true God doesn't appreciate idols. He probably got that right out of How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? Not so in Sardis. So what's happening in Sardis? Here's what's happening in Sardis. They are not offending the Jews and they are not offending the Greeks because their works are incomplete. They are not preaching the whole counsel of God. As a result of that, they're not offending anybody, and they're probably experiencing a pretty steady growth, which is why their reputation is that they're alive. The church is growing. People are coming. We are alive. Jesus says, you're not alive, you're a lie. The fact of the matter is you're dead. And you're dead because the whole counsel of God is not there. You're dead because you're preaching not to offend people instead of preaching the whole counsel of God, which is always offensive to people. He warns them that he's going to come like a thief in the night. Look at what he says. There's several things that he requires of them. But before that, look at this, the thief in the night. He says, remember then what you've received and heard. Keep it and repent. If you will not wake up, I will come like a thief, and you will not know at what hour I will come against you. This is amazing. This verse, first of all, refers to Jesus saying in Matthew chapter 24, and also in other passages. Here's what you need to know. That saying about Jesus coming as a thief in the night always refers to his second coming. Everywhere else in the New Testament where you see that phrase, it refers to the second coming. 1 Thessalonians 5:2, for you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. Verse 4 of that same chapter. But you are not in darkness, brothers, for that day to surprise you like a thief. 2 Peter 3:10, but the day of the Lord will come like a thief, and then the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burned up and dissolved, and the earth and its works that are done on it will be exposed. And then Revelation chapter 16, verse 15, behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake, keeping his garments on, that he may not go about naked and be seen exposed. This is a picture of what we see in Matthew chapter 7. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name perform many miracles and cast out many demons? And I will say, depart from me, for I never knew you, you worker of iniquity. Can't you hear the echo? You have a reputation of being alive, but you're dead. It's not true. The other reason that this is important is because Sardis had an acropolis that had never been taken in battle. It was strong. No one who had ever attacked the city of Sardis had taken the acropolis at Sardis in battle head on. But twice, enemies snuck in under cover of darkness and defeated the city. You better believe they understood exactly what Jesus was saying. You think you're invincible, but just like this city thought it was invincible and twice was taken under cover of darkness, if you do not repent, I will come like a thief in the night. You do not know when, but judgment will come. What about this other picture of white garments? Listen to this from Craig Keener notes that in Asia Minor, there were many instances of writings that have been found that say that individuals who would come to these pagan temples who had soiled garments would be turned away, that they could not come in, that they could not worship because their garments were not clean. Again and again and again, we see this picture of white garments throughout the book of Revelation. And we'll see it again and again and again. It refers to the purity of the people of God, to the purity of their works. But then there's this other phrase that he uses. They not only have white garments, but he says they are worthy. That word worthy is used in 4:11, 5:2, 5:4, 5:9, and 5:12. Every time it's used, it refers to Christ and Christ only. This is the only time in Revelation that this word is used, and it refers to the followers of Christ. What has he said? You have a few names in Sardis, people who have not soiled their garments. They will walk with me in white, for they are worthy. They will in the future walk with me in white because they are worthy. What is Jesus referring to here? Is Jesus saying that these individuals, based upon something in and of themselves, have lived their lives in such a way that they're going to walk with me because of what they've done? Or, look at the tenses here again. You still have a few names in Sardis, people who have not soiled their garments. They haven't. They are faithful right now because they haven't soiled their garments. They will walk with me in white. They're going to walk with me in white. But there's something in the middle between you haven't soiled your garments in the past and you will walk with me in white in the future. Jesus says that's not in question. He has no doubt that they're going to walk with him in white. Why? Because they are worthy. And they're going to remain worthy. Why? Because it is an alien worthiness. It is an alien righteousness. It is the purity and holiness and righteousness of Christ himself who is upon them. You see, these individuals have a reputation that they're alive, but they're actually dead. Why are they dead? Because the Spirit of the living God does not rest on the church. These other individuals have an actual name and a real name. Why do they have a real name? Because the Spirit of the living God does rest on them. They do belong to Him. Their garments are clean because of the righteousness of Christ. They are going to walk with Him in white. Christ knows this. Why? Because His righteousness has become their righteousness. That's what it means to be saved, saints. My garments are not soiled. It almost didn't even feel right to say that because I know me. Amen? I am clean before God. How could any human being say that?
Of Nineveh and tell the people to repent. Jonah didn't want to go there. He got on a boat going the other way. He went exactly opposite of what God told him to do. You would think he's done. Too bad he stepped out of God's plan. But on the boat, a huge storm arose. They were all about to die. Jonah admitted to the crew that he was the problem, that he was running from God. That's why they were having trouble. The crew was so loving. They said, Jonah, thank you for being so honest. Then they threw him overboard. This should have been the end of Jonah's story. Out in the middle of the ocean in a huge storm. But it just so happened a big fish was swimming by at the right place, at the right time, feeling hungry, and it swallowed Jonah up. He spent 3 days in the belly of the fish. On the third day, the fish came up from the bottom of the ocean and spit Jonah out on dry ground. Hundreds of years later, Jesus would say, as Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days. Jonah was a picture of Jesus. God knew that he would get off course. He had already planned how that would foreshadow what Christ would do. What am I saying? Nothing randomly happens. Your mistakes have been taken into account in God's plan for your life. And I don't say that so you can live loose. Good, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. Joel says God's got me covered. No, mistakes, they cause heartache, they cause pain. 3 days in the belly of the fish. That sounds exciting now, but that was not a cruise liner. It was dark, dirty, smelly, seaweed all over his head. When the fish spit Jonah out, the first thing God told him was go to Nineveh and do what I asked you to do. God didn't change his mind, but he gave him another chance. When we make mistakes, when we fail, the accuser keeps whispering, you're done. God is finished with you. You had your chance. You'll never accomplish your dreams. No, get back up, Jonah. Your mistake is not a surprise to God. He's already designed your comeback. He's already laid out your new beginning. Why don't you get back in the game? Get your fire back. Get your passion back. Start dreaming again. Start believing again. That mistake didn't cancel your destiny. God still has a purpose for you to fulfill. When God told Abraham that he and his wife Sarah were going to have a baby in their old age, years went by and nothing happened. So Abraham decided to help God out, and he slept with Sarah's maid. They had a son, a boy they named Ishmael. They were so excited they finally had their baby. God said, that is not the promised child. That's the arm of the flesh. That's something you made happen. Ishmael, in one sense, was considered a mistake. He was the child that Abraham had out of wedlock. Now, Abraham is the father of our faith. You would think he would know better. Surely this wouldn't be in the plan of God. 4 generations later, when Joseph's brothers threw him into a pit, they were going to leave him there to die, but they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming. They decided instead to sell Joseph to them. The Ishmaelites were descendants of Ishmael. What once was considered a mistake was actually a part of God's plan to save Joseph's life. Only God, in His amazing wisdom, can take what was a mistake in one generation and use it to be a blessing in another generation. Nothing randomly happens. Even your mistakes are a setup. Why don't you quit beating yourself up for past failures? Quit living in regrets. Nothing you've done is too much for the mercy of God. Let that go. Start moving forward into the new things God has in store. A few years ago, Victoria lost her ring. It was a diamond band that her mother had given her, been in their family for several generations. Sometimes when we'd go on a trip, Victoria would hide it in the house. So for months, we searched everywhere. Every drawer, every cabinet, every pocket. That ring was nowhere to be found. About 3 years later, we were driving home late one night from out of town. It was after midnight. I was tired and ready to get home. Victoria said, "Joel, you better slow down. You're going to get a ticket." I was going about 75 and the speed limit was 65, maybe 55, but there was nobody on the highway. Wide open, way out in the country. All of a sudden, in my rearview mirror, I saw those flashing red lights. The officer came up to my window and I handed him my driver's license. And he said, "I'll need your insurance card as well." And Victoria opened the glove compartment and started looking. She found every document except our insurance. She ended up pulling everything out of the glove compartment, digging around in the back, maneuvering her hand here and there. And it's dark. You couldn't see anything. Plus, having the officer standing right there was nerve-wracking. At one point, Victoria, digging way back there, found something hard down in the crack. She kept digging and digging, pulled it out. It was the ring she had been looking for 3.5 years. She was so excited, so happy. She was over there rejoicing. Here, I was about to go to jail. She ended up finding the insurance card right on the top. It was like God caused her to overlook it. I handed it to the officer. He said, "Are you that minister?" I said, "I am." He said, "If I come to your church, will you save me a seat?" I said, "I'll save you a whole section." He handed it back, said, "Have a great night." Sometimes what we think is a setback is really God setting us up to do something amazing. Even mistakes we make, God knows how to turn them and use them for our good. A few days before Jesus was crucified, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane late one night praying. He was so overwhelmed with the weight of what he was about to do and under so much pressure that he sweat great drops of blood. He said, "Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me, but not my will, let your will be done." We celebrate what Christ did on the cross. That's the foundation of our faith. But the real battle took place in the garden. This is where he made the decision that even though it's not fair, even though Judas is about to betray me, even though these people have mocked and ridiculed me, Father, I trust you. I know it's all a part of your plan. We all have these times when life isn't fair. Somebody's come against you. You're fighting an illness. Business is slowed down. This is where you have to do like him and say, "God, I don't understand it, but I trust you. I know you're in control. You wouldn't have allowed it if it wasn't going to work for my good." Don't get discouraged when